go ahead and open the council work session for Monday, June the 5th. Tonight we have 4 items on our agenda. A couple of them will be fairly short, but the first 2 are, depends on the amount of discussion that goes along with it. But the first item is the City of Raymore's branding discussion. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. And before we start, if I could apologize, I had placed in front of each of you an amended agenda to what we had mailed out. Somehow when I PDF this, and this is what happens when I do it instead of Jeannie, when I PDF this, the boards and commission appointments were D and E rather than E being other. I kind of figured everybody. So we went ahead and placed the amended one in front of you. Not to have a whole lot of discussion on that one thing twice. The council heard the presentation from Ms. Laura Lynch with Lynch Pen at your last work session. Unfortunately, 2 of the council members could not be here. And so we thought in order to give them the opportunity to digest the same information, we'd had some questions relative to the logo component of it that we wanted to be able to follow up on. Mr. Icky suggested that this particular item be put off for council discussion until this meeting. And so with that, I will simply turn it over for council discussion to the council.
Anybody want to open the discussion on that? Go ahead, Ms. Moore.
I'll pose a question since I was one of the ones absent. I did not get a chance to see the work session video. What were the comments or thoughts given at the last meeting?
Well, it was pretty quiet, actually. We didn't get into it in depth. I think part of it was just to kind of to absorb it and think about it and be able to come back at this work session with some meaningful comments or supportive comments or even suggestions for change that might come about. But that's kind of where we left it at the last work session. Really, there were a couple of supportive comments, but most of it was just about absorbing it and kind of getting used to the idea because it is a significant change from what we've had in the past. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Well, then if I'm allowed, I'll go ahead and chime in. Obviously, this is the primary sheet that I was looking at. I've lived under the garden spot of the state for a long time and actually spent the midday with one of the council members who voted to approve that. And I asked him, I said, where'd you guys come up with that? I just, not thinking Raymore with garden. And the general response is, we have no, I don't remember. And I think that's what really stuck with me in that entire conversation. You know, I look at this personally. I'm not an artist, so I couldn't suggest anything better. For me, I'm thinking about though what sticks in my mind, and so color choice is irrelevant to me, but the diamond shaped thing on it, to be honest with you, stood out to me. Because I remember when we first saw Bartle Hall do their remodel, and they have the hair curlers. And that has a name. I don't remember the name, but I remember somebody calling it the hair curlers, and that's stuck in the Kansas City Star. The thing is, though, that's been recognized internationally. And when you think of pictures of Kansas City, they put that up there. You know exactly what you're looking at. The one thing I have to say about this, at least whether you like it or not, there's nothing else in the city like this. And that stands out. And if you go, what the hell is that? That's not the question. That's irrelevant. But it is the only thing you'll see on the side of a truck, and you'll know damn well that's a Raymore truck. And so, I'm wearing the county logo on my shirt. And I have no idea. I mean, obviously, that's the county courthouse in the center of it, but it's got 3 stars on it. Nobody today knows what those 3 stars meant down at the county. So, when you have something that means nothing, then that's what it's worth. When you have something that at least stands out more than, even if it's undescribable, there is value there. And compared to the garden spot of the state, which we're still all looking for that Raymore Garden, this to me at least is an improvement. I don't know if I'm technically allowed to say I want this, but I definitely like it better than our current logo, and I applaud the efforts. It's unique, it's creative, and knowing that, you know, it wasn't just a consultant, but it was citizen input, I'm at least favorable.
What's your thoughts on the tagline? From home to more.
It's interesting. I mean, it's not wowing me, but it's not bothering me either. I mean, we've talked about, since we are a bedroom community, we've talked about home a lot. We've, you know, at least that resonates.
Well, there is Mike, can you recite again what the 4 lines were that kind of followed on with then the theme, come home to more?
So there were the 4 focus areas identified by Laura, and one of them was that we are close to everything, but still our own community. We are connected, family-friendly. We are open to new business, and then that we are a community of pride.
But there were actually 4 lines that talked about more, and then it says, come home to more.
Right, so Laura had provided an example as part of her presentation of different campaigns that we could use behind, you know, the Come Home to More. And one of those kind of speaks directly to business where, you know, we're not just bringing business, but you're going to bring your business home to Raymore. That we can, your business can either come home to more, you can grow your business here, you know, that there's more opportunity, more development, more opportunity for your business, your employees, and so on.
Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead, Sonia.
I guess I'll be brave and go next. I didn't say much at the last meeting just because I know that people who were on the committee asked that we kind of pause and think about it and let it soak in because it was very different from what we've had. So I was willing to do that, and I did a lot of thinking about it. But I guess I was, in one word, and I respect the work of the team, and, you know, both the people we hired and the citizens who worked on it, but I guess I was disappointed. I was, like Derek said, it was not something that wows him. I was hoping for something that was like, wow. I was really hoping for something where we could look at it and see the history of Raymore and see the future of Raymore and see the pride, the things we're proud of about our city. And so someone could see it or hear the tagline and be like, oh, that's what Raymore is. But nothing about this says to me, that's what Raymore is. That's what Raymore stands for. I want to go check out that city because this looks interesting. I found it kind of peculiar, not that I'm really against the little symbol there, but it's a little peculiar to me that we're kind of building this brand around something that we actually haven't seen yet. We've just seen a sketch of it. And it's something that's going to be, as of right now, just in one spot in the city. So, I mean, I guess if we do this, I feel like we're committed to taking that piece of art or that symbol and putting it in more places in the city. I know from what we saw, you know, from the art, it was kind of referred to as the seed is the name of the piece of art. So I don't know if we're supposed to see this symbol as a seed or a spaceship or, you know, like, I guess I look at it and say, what is it? And what does that tell me about Raymore? Does it tell me about the future? Does it tell me about the past? Does it tell me about something that I should think about when I think about Raymore? And it doesn't. And the tagline, it's kind of catchy, but I really feel like, and maybe the negative side of my brain, I feel like it leaves us open to people turning it into something not positive. It's too open-ended. You know, think about the things the people in Raymore aren't happy about, or the things that people tend to complain about. Come home to more high water bills. come home to more red tape from the city, come home. It's just so open-ended that people can really easily turn it into something that we don't intend for it to be. The opposite, frankly, of what we intend for it to be. And so the open-endedness of that, I would rather have something that's like, here's what we are, here's what Raymore is, here's why you should come check out Raymore, and that's not what this is. Positives, I like the big letters, I like the colors, but I was kind of disappointed. I wish we would have taken some of the information from our town hall meetings to get a bigger picture from our 200 people that talked to us in those town hall meetings, and really played on, what is it about Raymore's history that we want to value? What is it about Raymore's future that we're looking forward to? What are people in Raymore proud of that we should put out there in front of everyone so that people can say, this is what Raymore is. I don't feel like it says what Raymore is. So that's my 2 cents.
Mr. Barber?
Well, I guess I was the only one that commented on the last meeting, and I liked it. I liked how simple it was. And I kind of go back to when Meredith went over and gave us that information about, well, what I learned, what I didn't know about branding. And it was interesting what branding is and what it's not. And when you look at like the Apple logo, and you look at that in itself, it's just an apple with a bite out of it. But really what makes an apple is that, and how it works and how we work with it. And the whole point, I think, of this is not so much this as much as what's it going to go on? What are we going to do with it? Past just the visual in moving forward. And I think the idea of this is when somebody sees that symbol, whether it's a city truck driving by or a city employee with something, on their shirt, you may not be close enough, like Derek's shirt. I can't tell what that's on his shirt. But if that symbol was there, I may not be able to read Raymore, but I could tell that that's Raymore. And I think that's the whole purpose of the branding. And I respect what everybody says, but it's not really to send a message. It's to get people kind of thinking and looking and recognizing us. Oh, Bartle Hall with those things on top of it. You don't need to see that that's in Kansas City. That's Bartle Hall if you're from Kansas City. If you see this per se, it's Raymore. So in that respect, to me, it's very easy to take this symbol and move it on all the medias that we would use with it, whether it be as a ball cap or a water tower or a city truck or a pamphlet or a website or all those things. To me, a symbol like that is real easy to move. And if you get something that's real complicated, then I think you lose it. I think you kind of lose the vision. So I'm still going to say that I support it. I like the simplicity of it. Come home to Raymore, or come home to Moore. I just think I think it works. I mean, it works for me. I'm just one, but I still like it and still support it.
Mr. Burke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was not here for the original meeting, so I watched it online, and I've had a little bit of a chance. I went the next day. It was the last day of school, so I had a little bit of time, and I just looked at hundreds and hundreds of logos on the internet. I just plugged in city logos, and what also came up were a lot of soccer crests. And originally, obviously, I'm a huge Kansas City soccer fan, and I hated the Sporting Kansas City logo when it first came out. I looked at it, I'm like, what the hell is that? What does that mean, anything? And it has been so amazing to me how many people are walking around with articles of clothing on with that logo now, that so many of us diehards said, oh my God, what is that? I think that's the symbol up here at the top. I think it evokes questions in people. It makes them go, like if you had a shirt with just those bars on there, on your shirt. People would go, well, what is that? And then you could start up a conversation. I thought that was, and that just came to me a few minutes ago. I like the lowercase letters underneath the name because it is a small community. We are something special. We're not trying to get out there and say, hey, we're better than everybody else. But we know what makes Raymore special, and we don't need to go out and tell everybody about it because the people that want to know will come and ask us questions, and then we'll just walk around or drive around with them and show them why we're different. It's not something that you can put on a sign. But it is something that you could do to start a conversation. And I think that could be a good positive to this. But I initially looked at it and was like, yeah, it's okay. But I like the M. It kind of looks like a pedestal underneath the artwork. I asked my family their opinions, and they said, it's all right, it's all right. And that's kind of what I remember in the beginning with that sporting logo that now I have plastered on everything that I own. I could see those bars maybe being something, and maybe not even needing the word Raymore under it. After a while, people would say, oh, look at that, they're synonymous. I don't know.
John, do you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to echo what a couple of people said here. Initially, when this was presented, I have to admit I was a little disappointed too. I didn't know what to expect. If you take away the symbol, I think that the tagline and the word Raymore, I like it a lot. I think the tagline's fantastic. I think it's simple, but in a way brilliant. And I do like the way the artwork sits on top of the M, and Councilman Burke brought up the point that it evokes questions. So I showed this to some people, just to, a dozen people or so, just to get a little straw poll to see. I myself don't care for the emblem, and I thought maybe I would get used to it. So I tried to keep an open mind, and I was hoping it would grow on me, and it hasn't yet. But it did start a lot of conversation. And I didn't get a lot, in my little tiny straw poll that I did, I didn't get a lot of positive support for it. So I'm still debating my thoughts on it, but I will say when you take this and put it next to the old logo, this is very simple. It's very modern, it's very fresh. So I want to thank the people that worked on it. Maybe we can consider changing the logo, maybe not, but those are my thoughts. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, John. Kevin, do you have something?
Well, I don't want to sound like a negative nanny, but I guess I'm not going to lie. I didn't have any enthusiasm or excitement for this, the logo. I like the tagline. I think the committee did a very good job on the tagline. I think that's great. But very disappointed that we didn't have more choices or have a broader view of different examples. It was said that, this is something that would be iconic to Raymore because of the sculpture that's going on. I guess I'm kind of offended. How can we say something's iconic on something that we haven't even seen? That's where I'm at with it there. And it just goes back to, I just wish we would have had a little broader, one choice is not really a choice at all, in my opinion. Now, I agree with a lot of things that have been said. This is something that, I like the direction of a logo, a major change in the logo. It's just that, one of the comments that I got was from a person I work with. She saw it in the newspaper. She says, "What in the world is that?" And I'm like, "Well, that's the proposed logo that is coming before us." And she says she didn't like it. That's being honest. Like I say, I don't like to sit here and be negative about it because there's so much there that I think is good. It's just that, I can't get over that. I don't have any excitement for the logo. I think that there could have been an opportunity for more examples for us to consider. So That's what I got.
Reginald?
Yes, it's kind of hard to say something different, as everyone has already said. It's very similar things. I initially also liked the logo, I liked the direction. I like the aspect of it having an iconic representation of the city, whatever that ends up being. It sounds like there's some concerns without having options. I too can kind of concur with that, because I'm used to having, when you have proposals, there's several options or courses of action, if you would call it that, to choose from, but we were kind of presented here with just the one. In how the direction is going, the more modern, the more, fresh and new, in relation to our current logo and motto, if you will. I see, the direction they want to go and the intent with trying to, as our economic development strategies and how the different developers are conceptual designs of different businesses and such, and is a perfect example, our Cadence right there on 58 and Dean, and how that's completely different from everything around it, and its design, and how this kind of is in the same construct of being fresh and new and completely different from what we're used to. I look at our existing logo and I see it as the imagery that's there is more rural and farm, while that's our history, and we're still going to have that agricultural base and all that surrounding us. This kind of invokes for anyone who's researching our city and businesses that are wanting to come to the city, that we also have opportunities for you here, not just in what that may give you a false impression of only having. So I see all the angles and different angles, but I do like this one. I like the direction. Maybe if there were more choices, we may have been able to try to get some different vantage points and different ways to try to get a better consensus or a broader acceptance, of the direction we're going. But I like the typeface, the icon. I like the aspect of, in relation to the artwork and its connection. It is very iconic if it ends up being that piece. Just like any other icon or statue or sculpture, when you see it, you immediately know. When you see the bull, you immediately know where that's at. Obviously, when you see the Statue of Liberty, you know where that's at. Certain imagery, it invokes, that relationship and that connection. And I'd like to see some aspect of that, whether it be with the tagline, whether it be with the logo, or whether it be with the structure mixed in with that whole branding of the Raymore. I think that helps with our long-term plan for growing Raymore. But I, again, echo, I like it. I like the direction it's going. That's all. Thank you.
Jay, I had some comments. Do you want me to go first? Do you want to go first? Well, from my perspective, having been on the committee, I had to take into account, what other areas of our city we're working on. We've done the Reimagine Raymore when we did our work out there and did our citizens focus groups. Economic development has gone in a direction of using the term grow on, which is kind of a takeoff on this type of a logo. If you look at it from a growth capacity in our community growing. So it is, I realize it's different. It does kind of follow on with where we have been going. I do know that Laura did take into account a lot of what was said, because she was given some of those final results from our citizens' community conversations. So it wasn't like she was in a vacuum when she did start the process. And they did have other things. Frankly, from the staff's perspective, this was the best, by far the best. And from a marketing perspective, I think the uniqueness of it and the simpleness of it was kind of what they were trying to portray to us through the process, is that we realize this isn't much, but that you don't want much. You want to keep it simple and make it realizable later on down the road what we stand for, and an image that can be unique to Raymore. It's certainly unique to Raymore. It certainly would be unique to any community that adopted it, but it kind of fits within the top of the line there on the M. I'm like the rest of everybody here. I was a bit awestruck on the first rendering and had to go home and think about it before I felt like things could move forward with it. I do like the tagline. It's quite possible there could be something else that represents Raymore at the top of that line, keeping the idea in mind that, you know, we've used that theme over the past couple of years with Reimagine and Grow On and things like that. So from a marketing perspective, it kind of falls in line if we try to explain what that is. But the uniqueness of it is that it does give people to come up with their own assumptions about what it is. Even talking to Mr. Fearborn, he looked at it as a ladder for progress. So it was when he first saw it. So it has a meaning from that category as well. So maybe it's something we still need to kind of chew on a little bit before we make any final decisions about it. I know from a marketing perspective, Mike, with his just newly hired assistant, are going to be working on marketing perspectives to move forward with whatever logo we have. So they are waiting on us as well. But I just wanted to talk about those things before, because I know Jay's pretty passionate about having been part of the original branding team. Go ahead, Jay.
Thank you, sir. A couple things, just so you know, the branding committee did not create this. This was created by Laura Lynch and the artists. This was presented to us. We were more of a test pilot group, would you say, probably?
Sounding board, yeah.
And it was fed to us in pieces. And I, like many of you, had the same reaction. And I realized later on I was expecting something different. I was expecting an enclosed model. And the more you think about that and the more you look at it, it's very commonplace for the 1970s. This logo that we have right now is very busy. It's very detailed. And this is dumbed down, remember. This is the color palette we came up after using about all 57 colors in the crayon box plus 2 pinks that don't exist in nature. Again, everybody said this, very clean. This is modern. I think this one says 2017 a lot more than this does. And I think this speaks to where we're going as opposed to where we've been. Now, this had its time and place. I think that this is going to be the future of Raymore. As far as a lot of people are fixated on the geometric design above the M. One thing you want to remember, a couple things you want to remember. First of all, you all have knowledge that the rest of our citizenry base does not have. This little geometric shape can and will stand on its own without being attached to this. There will be a few people that will make this connection. Everybody at this body will make that connection, but not everybody will make that connection. That is our intent, that this will give us identity. This will be a piece of artwork that is at a major entrance to our city on 58 Highway. Much as if I hold up this piece of paper, and I'm going to apologize, I'm not a very good artist, everybody at this table knows what that mark is. That's branding, folks. When you can tell from a geometric design who that company is. Somebody's probably wearing those shoes in this room. That's what we're trying to get at with the branding effort. Am I not correct, Mr. Icky? That's what we want people to see, that, just as Joe pointed out, the bars itself may stand out as, that's Raymore. That's what we're trying to get at here. That's why I think it's important. I like the little bit of the shades and differences in the colors, but another thing to remember, if you remember the presentation from, was it Harriet, when she talked to us about what art is and what is not, what art is not? It doesn't matter what you put up in here. If you put up a Jesse Barnes painting, I'm going to love it because I love Jesse Barnes, but other people aren't. You put up Jackson Pollock, going to be a lot of people that don't like that. I'm one of them, but there are a lot of people that do. Art is different to different people. It doesn't surprise me that this body of 8, whether it were body of 8 or 80, there's going to be people that don't like it. The question is this functional? Will this work for us? I appreciate your comments, but I take the opposing view, the eternal optimist, the high school dreamer. This is going to come home to more shops, more restaurants as we go into the future, more housing choices, better schools. That's how I see this. I also believe, I know you've talked about putting this off, I believe that the time is here, sir. As I count, I believe we have a majority, simple majority, not a full majority yet, we have one on the fence. I would personally and formally request that this be put on our next agenda for a voting item, yes or no, up and down.
Okay. So from a consensus perspective, is everybody okay with putting it out there as a resolution, or is it an adoption item? Saying yes, yes, yes. 2, 3, 5. Well, that's true. It only takes one council member to sponsor it. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand. And I mean, it is, it's different. I mean, it certainly is different. And I totally understand everybody's perspective on it. I really do. Yeah, Jay?
As I do, too. I have great respect for those with differing opinions, especially on this subject. This, as Chris will remember when we met in the committee, when Chris and I were taking it in, and I said, this is bold. This is to use a Star Trek term, this is a bold step forward. It truly is. We're putting it out there. It's ours. We also have the ability, if it completely goes south, in 3 months, we can spend money and change it again if we have to. I don't think we're going to need to. I think it's going to stick. I think people are going to get used to it. We're going to like it. It's going to further what we're trying to do. But I do understand what you're saying. I do.
Yes, sir.
Well, going back to the Nike Swish, I will say that's a completely stupid logo. I mean, it doesn't actually say anything about shoes, but that's the point. And having a wife who's an artist, I will say this. My wife pointed something out to me when we first started dating. She goes, in art, the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy and not having an opinion. For every person who spoke up and said, I don't like this, you just fell victim to the very point that you just made, that you should support this, because you formed an opinion about it and people didn't like it. That's the point. That's the point of all art. The Nike Swish is one of the most popular brand images there is. It's a stupid backward check mark. But the point is everybody knows it because they form an opinion about it. The art that you should not support is the art that you have no opinion about.
Ms. Abdulwood.
Are we going to be able to spend millions of dollars to tell people that this is our brand like Nike has? I think that's a major difference.
Well, but they're selling a product, so they're making revenue. They're not spending money, they're making money off of that, so.
Mr. Kellogg.
Respectfully, I'll say this, but I'm rather offended, and I've already said that no choice is not a choice. One choice is not a choice. And for me to think that I don't understand or I'm proven, the reverse psychology of art offends me, and I'm sorry that I have to say that, but that offends me. I just think that, this is one of the few times that something has come to the council that there wasn't multiple choices or something more to look at rather than just the force-fed, this is what you get, and I guess I feel like I don't need to apologize, but, I guess I don't want to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Placated to, I guess, or that's not really what I'm looking for. But I don't know, I just, for the money we spent, I think that a couple choices would have been what we're used to.
Well, and if I may respond, Mr. Kellogg, I don't mean to offend you personally. And I agree, yes, I'd like to see options too, but the problem is until somebody creates the alternative option, this is what we have. The point I'm trying to make is look at other types of art. Igor Stravinsky does The Rite of Spring. He performs it, they riot in the streets. It's not considered a classical music masterpiece. You look at, in the 80s growing up, anything that had the parental label on it at the music store, Two Live Crew on up, people bought it. I mean, and look at, we see that as musical talent now, but we were angry about it. You have nothing to, I'm not challenging you not liking it. What I'm saying though is is art is meant to be challenged. Art is meant to be liked and disliked. And so it's not a bad thing to dislike it. That's what I'm kind of getting at. I agree with you, options. Sure, I'd love options too, and I guess we're kind of an open-ended challenge. If anybody wants to come up with alternatives, that would be fantastic. I would welcome that too. Go ahead.
As you sit there and speak, thank you. As you speak, I did come up with something, just my own, whether it's flaky or weird or sappy. That's what I saw here when I see this. I see something more than just Raymore there, okay? If I was to have a red pen in my hand, which I don't, I looked to see if somebody had one, I would outline A-M-O-R-E. I see Amore in there. That's just one idea. Have it, there's so many more things that I believe that a professional could come up with rather than just what we've been presented, That's just my opinion, There's so much more that can be done, I think. And we just haven't seen it.
Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next item. And that would be the presentation of 2017 ETC City Survey results.
Thank you, sir. With that, I will call on Mr. Ike.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. Just to give you a quick update, and we'll get into more of the kind of the details of the methodology in just a second, but wanted to give you an update. So you are looking at the most recent data from ETC. This past spring, they conducted the biannual, every 2 years survey of the community through a mail-in survey through a randomly selected group within of our residents. This year, they had the added benefit of not only being able to send a paper survey, but also were able to email our surveys, or email surveys to residents and allow them to take it online. This year, much like the last survey we saw 2 years ago, you're going to notice a lot of the metrics kind of stay the same. But really the big picture and the big message that we can take out of this as we start to dive down is that our residents are happy with the services and with the quality of life that they have here in Raymore. The large kind of question that we always ask is, the perception of the quality of life. And we dive down into a lot of very specifics, specifics about programs, specifics about the city itself. But the one question that we ask is kind of the overall satisfaction rating for the city of Raymore. And our residents, of all that responded to that question, of the city rated the same or above the U.S. average in 44 of the 48 areas that were assessed. The city of Raymore rated significantly higher than the United States average and 5% or more in 40 of the different areas that we surveyed. So to give you kind of an overall idea, in the 2017 survey, this one that you're looking at, we asked our residents, are you satisfied with the quality of life in our community? 87% of the respondents said very satisfied or satisfied, which is an incredibly high number. From the U.S. standpoint, if we look at that same question, ETC surveys a number of communities throughout the United States. Only 75% of those communities rated their quality of life as very satisfied or satisfied. The 12% difference between us and the national average. Regionally, when we kind of scope in a little closer and just look at Kansas City on average rated their quality of life as very satisfied or satisfied at 73%. So again, we have a 14% higher difference between what other communities are rating as their quality of life and what our residents are saying they are either satisfied or very satisfied with their quality of life. You know, as we said, we are setting the standard nationwide, and we will notice as we get deeper into some of the other statistics and some of the individual programs, you know, we continue to rank higher than our peer cities, not just in the Kansas City area, but throughout the region. But our work, of course, is not done, and we will talk at the very end of the survey about a couple of opportunity areas, areas that we can look at and, you know, and identify some priorities, either continue to prioritize areas that we know we need to work a little bit better on or focus on, or also look at areas that maybe we just need to change our strategy on just slightly. So what I think is really important is if we look long-term. The big statistic that ETC pulled out of this and that ETC kind of continued to repeat back as we were discussing the executive summary and as you read through is our long-term trend. We started doing the survey in 2006, and since 2006 have conducted the survey every 2 years asking roughly the same questions. In 67 of the areas where we have been asking questions since 2006, or I'm sorry, 67 of the areas, 66 of those areas have remained the same or have gone higher. All but one area has dipped below or has garnered a lower satisfaction rating than what we earned at the very beginning of this survey. It's incredibly telling to show that in that period of time, that 10-year period of time with all of the data sets that we've been able to collect, that many areas have remained the same satisfaction level or increased. So of the surveys that they sent out, 400 were mailed, and they set a goal of receiving 400 completed surveys. And the survey itself, the tool, is at the very back of your packet. Because of the added online component and the email component, they surpassed that goal and actually collected about 612 surveys in all. And so they were able to narrow their methodology, their margin of error within their methodology down to a 3.96%. And what that means is they were able to garner a 95% confidence rating. In short, if we were to conduct this survey again and again with a different 400 or a different sampling of 600, we'd be gaining the same statistics, the same numbers over and over again. And so here are some of the areas that we felt were important to highlight and that we think are kind of outstanding in these areas. The successes, obviously public safety is an incredibly important area within this community.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
And once again, the question that we ask, you know, our police department is measured by a number of metrics, whether that's the number of traffic tickets written, number of arrests made, just number of officers we even have in the community. But what this statistic really gets to at the heart of is we ask our residents, how safe do you feel in the community? Do you as an individual resident feel safe during the daytime? 100% of the respondents said that they feel safe in our community during the daytime. At the same time at night, 96% said that they feel safe. And then on the trails, 91%. The number just below each of those areas for our comparisons to that KC Metro, that regional area. So when they look at the same question from communities around the Kansas City metropolitan area, we see that only 89% come back with that same feeling of safety in their community. We are doing incredible things in this area. Second area that we looked at that had a good increase, a good significant increase, were the maintenance of our public streets. We asked whether folks felt satisfied or very satisfied, and we saw a 4% increase in folks responding that they felt satisfied or very satisfied that their neighborhood streets were being maintained well, and a 6% increase in residents saying that they felt satisfied or very satisfied that major roadways, our 58 Highway, Lucy Webb, Madison, are included in those areas. Some very good increases in these areas, and I think it is a direct credit to a lot of the work that's been going on in Public Works. Another area of Public Works is landscaping of public areas along streets. We saw a 7% increase. This going back between, comparing just the 2015 and 2017 areas. code enforcement for buildings and homes, another good increase. And these last few slides, I believe, go directly to a lot of the work that we have done in, just bringing streets, making them look nice, making the community look nice, and kind of giving an overall sense of a good look to our community. Now, growth was broken up into two areas, and this again goes to the importance of what Mr. Carteret and the planning department perform. The two questions were broken up into how well or how satisfied are you with the planning for growth in our community? And in the last 2 years, we saw a 10% increase in the future planning of growth. And when it came to the managing of growth and kind of the physical boots on the ground, how well are we managing new development, whether residential or commercial, we saw a 6% increase.
9%?
Sorry, a 9% increase. That is,
Sorry.
Communication's not a numbers guy.
It's not.
with the amount and the type of new development. We asked them whether they were residents, whether they were satisfied or very satisfied. We saw a 14% increase when they were asked about new development in the community. In this area, the openness to public involvement, I think, speaks directly to the Reimagine Raymore and the community conversations that we held, as well as any of the other areas, whether that's through planned programming or the Report a Concern program on our website, just the openness and ability of residents to be able to be involved in their government. And we saw a 7% increase in that area. There were a couple of opportunity areas and a couple of areas that I think are worth mentioning out of this report. The first one, although it has a downward arrow, really there was not a lot of change from 2015 to 2017. However, between 2012 and 2015, there was about a 6 to 7% decrease in this area. So we saw a decrease 4 years ago. We've maintained in the last 2 years, and so we've not quite recovered that deficit. And I think this is a good area or a good opportunity area, as it speaks to the next question when it comes to how easy are individual departments to contact at the city. And we saw a decrease between 2015 and 2017. We know this is an area and something that we're working with on our frontline staff, as well as with new technology coming online to directly address this, to hopefully move this number into a more positive direction.
Mike, was there one, with regard to that, were there comments that were provided to us by ETC that outlined difficulties with that you could be a little more specific about, areas of improvement?
For that question specifically?
Yeah, how did it says easy to contact. I mean, everything's automated now. You can go through online, you can hit us through Facebook, you can, there's just so many ways to get in touch with us through social media, and the phone system is so self-explanatory. I'm just kind of curious as to what barriers were identified as what we couldn't do, or what people couldn't do.
I directly attributed the phone system is incredibly detailed and very self-explanatory. The problem is when people call in and they don't know who they need to talk to because of their problems, or they don't know that we say code enforcement under community development, code enforcement, press 3, but they don't necessarily know if the problem they have is code enforcement or they need to be talking to a planner, as an example of building a shed. So the importance of being able to have the live voice if you have the question about who you need to talk to, and having that person expertly trained. And of course, the council has been good enough to allow for that change in the budget, which we'll be posting up very shortly. This is, I think, going to help us immensely with that particular downward arrow. The new phone system is going to allow for some pretty interesting ways for those persons who still want to use it And of course, our receptionist is only going to be part-time for this year. But when that phone system is on, it's going to be much more user-friendly, we believe.
So Parks and Recreation, the question that we asked was the overall quality of the Parks and Recreation Department. And we listed this, while there was no change from 2015 to 2017, we listed this as an area of opportunity, mostly because as we look forward, we know with Centerview coming online, the Raymore Activity Center, expanded programming, this is really going to be an area to watch for the next 2 years when we go into surveying again, as I could see this plateau increasing based upon just even the new amenities that we're going to have online the next time we go back to our residents. This was an important area that I thought was great to highlight. Near the back of your charts and graphs, and I want to make sure I can get you directed to the right page. On about page 17 of the charts and graphs section is where you'll see the ETC data, and we've interpreted it up here just kind of for ease of reading. 2 years ago, we asked whether our residents' needs were being met in these areas, from sense of safety, quality of public schools, affordability of housing, access to dining, and so on. In all of these areas, we have had in 2017 a positive rating. All, the residents who have responded to these from 54% up to 98%. The 3 areas that I have highlighted on the screen, these were 3 areas that 2 years ago our residents gave us a 46, a 45, and a 47 below satisfactory rating. And so what you're looking at on the left is our 2017 rating, the number of residents who said we were meeting their needs in that area. And on the right, you're seeing what residents said, whether we were meeting their needs in these areas back in 2015. This shows that as we've been moving forward with things like the Arts Commission, with our management of new development, planning, economic development, we are working these 3 areas that our residents said we weren't meeting their needs in and moving them up the charts significantly, indicating that we are hitting these areas and moving in the right direction. So this provides us, and ETC provides analysis through the data that they've collected for a number of opportunities and areas that we can focus on in the way of priorities. So they provide a good analysis as we read through the data, and the executive summary does a good job of really stepping through, when they look at the data, how they're determining what is considered a high priority, a very high priority, a high priority, and a medium priority. It allows us to remain focused on the areas where we are doing a good job, but at the same time allows ETC to take some of that data and show us the very high priorities for the city for the next 2 years should be in these areas. We know, for example, and this is the example that ETC used, public safety is rated very highly. That doesn't mean it's not going to be a priority for the city for the next 2 years. It is still a priority, but for us to move the needle in the overall satisfaction, the overall quality of life, to move the needle to a more positive place, so we take that 87%, move it to 88 or 89, their recommendation is to focus on these areas in the next 2 years, based on these rankings and the satisfaction ratings in these areas. Not a lot has changed between 2015 and 2017. I believe in looking at the 2015 data, the only thing that has moved is the number 2 high priority overall maintenance of city streets went from very high to that middle column. And this just kind of provides another visual look at what kind of some of those high priority areas are. They break it out into the different quadrants, kind of like a SWOT analysis. What were we rated lower on, a lower satisfaction, and then when asked, what do you think of, asked our residents, what do you think is a high priority? It broke into these areas. And so these, on the lower left quadrant, those are areas that our residents rated as having a lower satisfaction, but also rated as a lower importance in some areas.
Mr. Keller?
May I ask you to explain, I see up there, and I also heard you say that we have opportunities to work on how we communicate with our citizens when they call in, but it says less important than city communication. In what context is that there?
This would be if we were to look at what would move the needle positively more effectively, if that makes sense. So if we were looking at the quality of Parks and Rec programs and the quality of public safety services, those we know already have a high satisfaction rating. If we were looking to move that needle quicker, we would want to look at the opportunities for improvement. These are areas that our residents have said, these are important to us, but they're not quite hitting the satisfaction level that ETC believes we could be. At the same time, not to say that stormwater management, city communication, or enforcement of codes is not important, but the impact based on the level of importance our residents have placed on it kind of skews the data a little differently. And these, this chart, as well as several others, are located within the next chapter beyond the individual charts and graphs. And so there's kind of an even further dive into some of that, as well as an individual program breakdown of the same kind of analysis for public works specific, parks and recreation specific, and public safety specific.
And what we would see from the, Mike, if you could go back for just a second, what we would see under the opportunities for improvement, which is red for a reason, that's obviously high priority for us to be targeting our efforts to. Overall maintenance of the city streets, the graph relative to the maintenance of the going up, both of the up arrows, the 4% and the 6%, we think what we're hearing there is, we're glad for what you're doing, and you better keep doing it. And of course, a huge issue on that is the money that the council has put into relative to the bond issue. The main arterials going up 6%, I'm sure was everybody driving up and down 58 Highway and seeing that. It's a direct correlation to that. The council has in the upcoming years, relative to the congestion, we're going to be putting in New Fox Ridge, New Johnson. That's going to help in 2 years with those. But those being in red does not necessarily always translate into, we don't think you're doing enough. It's, you better keep doing what you have done in the last 2 years. Value for tax dollars and fees, we've got to do a better job of telling them the value that what they're getting for their tax dollars and fees. We still suffer from the urban legend of being the highest water bill in Cass County. Everybody knows that's not true. We're obviously not getting that information out well enough. We're going to turn it around in the next 2 years.
You know, and relative to this graph as well, there is one slide that I didn't include in the presentation just because the data is a little harder to show visually when we look at, say, congestion on some of our main roadways. There is a graph on page 18, it's question 21, and it gets directly to the satisfaction our residents have expressed when it comes to congestion on roadways. What is important to point out, and I think is also important to acknowledge, is for the most part on all of these major roadways, our residents have a very positive, they responded that they were satisfied or very satisfied with that, how we have been managing traffic along those roadways. The one area, and the reason it gets a little complicated to kind of point out, is we ask them about traffic flow at 50 Highway and 49. We don't necessarily have control of that. But we have partnered with, many different, different programs like Project Greenlight in order to alleviate that, and it has made a difference. In 2015, those that were dissatisfied with traffic flow at 58 and 49, that was up at 95%. It has now lowered to 65, and while there is still work that we can do, I think that shows that we are moving the needle positively on that area.
Excuse me, Mike, Mr. Holman?
Thank you, sir. I think he answered most of it. I was just going to kind of dovetail on the point there that we've known for a number of years, we keep getting that same result back. Most of the dissatisfaction actually comes from an area near but outside the city at the bridge, and we don't, it's well into Belton's jurisdiction, we don't control it. However, I would also say we want to remember that we're as innovative as anybody around. I mean, you name me another city that's going to go out and grab a road outside their jurisdiction just to rebuild a bridge to make it better for our citizens. So, Mike, you work some pretty good magic with communications. I don't know, maybe there's a solution there to help move that needle going forward. I'm sure there's a lot of people outside this room that aren't really sure where our city limits end and begin over there on 58 around Walmart. So, yeah, I would agree. It's an opportunity, but it's complex at the same time. Thank you.
That I was going to ask, Mike, could you step up, please? I was going to ask you a question. I know it's been a while since I asked you about it, so I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but through the process, I'd asked you to, with that transportation study group that was through MoDOT, that was looking at that congestion up there, we'd talked about the potential for turning the middle lane to a straight through or right turn also as an option for the 58 highway north off of 58, or I-49 north off of 58 west, so that 2 lanes could then turn, particularly as it relates to morning traffic where everybody's trying to get on the highway, because they have the down ramp that's 2 lanes wide for quite a ways, how they could potentially merge that. Was there any benefit that MoDOT saw to looking at that, or are they still looking at it?
I will, with the change of counterparts at Belton, my understanding is the report has been completed, but I have not got a copy of it, so I'll reach out to them and get a copy of that report and see what their recommendations were, because I know they studied all the way from Y Highway to Bell Ray, and we are looking at, as development occurs around Kentucky and 58, to extending that study further east.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thanks. I just had a question that came up, so I thought I'd ask.
And then the last area, and this is on page 19, we asked our residents a couple of questions about what they thought, we got to choose the answers, what they thought out of ideas were the most important in Raymore to focus on in the next 2 years. And so these were answers that were generated out of those community conversations, some things that we saw kind of crop to the top or come to the top from those. And we allowed residents to, again, kind of weigh in, and I feel like we have a fairly good representation of what that data has been. That was on question 22, and then on question 23, we even went so far as to ask what features within, say, a town center would our residents expect to see, or what would make a town center in their mind. And so, again, some very interesting answers that allows us to move forward. Any questions about the ETC survey?
Mr. Fearborn, did you have any?
If the council is okay with it, one of the things we thought is, obviously the full survey is a lot to digest. We wanted to give you some of the staff-directed areas that we had noted and that ETC had pointed out to us. But if the council is good with it, I would like to just put this on in case you had any other questions or something came to you as you've had the chance to just really tear all of this apart. And I'd like to put this on for the second work session, or I'm sorry, I'm going to be presumptive here, the third work session in July, which is the 5th Monday of July. If that's okay with the council, just give you a little bit of time to tear the data apart.
How does this dovetail into a strategic plan that staff's working on?
Interestingly enough, that's the exact same time we plan on bringing you the strategic plan,
okay.
sir.
All
So
right.
that might work out very, very well.
Thank you.
And there are a number of these areas that have been addressed in action steps within the strategic plan, so we'll be able to show you those and kind of cross-reference things.
Great.
Which may, one of the things we'll be asking the council for is not necessarily from the action steps, but from the goals beneath the focus areas, the areas of emphasis. We will be asking you to prioritize those as we move forward. So this will be a very good tool for the council to use and for staff to use in making recommendations to you on it.
Okay. Ms. Abdelgawad, did you have a question?
Thank you. I was just, during the presentation, flipping through and looking at some of the numbers, and one of the things that I noticed is that there are several areas that are lower in this year's survey than they were in last year's survey. But in noticing that, most of them are less than 3% lower. So pretty insignificant, the amount of difference that we're seeing. But the areas that have, there also are several areas that have improvements that are huge improvements. There are some that have little minor improvements, but there are some that have huge improvements. So I'm looking forward to digging into it a little deeper and kind of seeing what we can figure out about it. I know sometimes with things like this, it's easy to pick out the highlights and brag about those a lot and not dig so deep into the little tiny things in there. And I also finally want to add that I'm really excited that we were able to fit in question 22 and 23, asking about the most important things for us to focus on in the next 2 years, using the information from our meetings with the citizens, and to see exactly what their vision of that town hall or that town center area might be.
Anyone else? Yeah, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you. I'm kind of curious, do we remember how many participants filled out the survey in 2015 compared to this year? We were looking for 400 this year, and we got a 612 response. I'm just kind of curious if there's something telling in those two figures.
We had a little over 400 in 2015, and so in both instances, ETC came back and felt that those were statistically significant. With more data that they were able to analyze, they felt, and you saw with the margin of error, they were able to shrink that margin a little bit. And so while they don't believe the data would have changed, they were just a little more confident in the data that they were able to provide us for this year.
Okay, thank you.
So the margin of error narrowed with this group of?
It did, yes. 2 years ago, I want to say it was just slightly over 4%, and so it wasn't a full percent, but I can double check.
And it was what this time? 2.5, 3?
3.
3.9, okay. Mr. Holman?
Thank you, sir. I've said this before. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but Harry Truman, when he was president, was once quoted as saying, "This job is nothing more than a glorified PR person." And I think that can be said as a leader or leaders of any large-scale group. The thing that struck me about this were the first 5 slides and their relationship to how people felt in the 80s after Ronald Reagan was elected president, because that was, if you disagree with everything else he did, you would have to agree that the man made us feel better about who we were as a nation. Big picture, people are happy. Certainly applies to the years of the Reagan administration. Raymore, or at the time the USA, is setting the standard. Our work is not done, and Raymore had 100% feeling of safety during the day and 96% during night. He built up the military to make us feel safer. That's, ladies and gentlemen, that's a good track record to go forward with. That really is. That speaks volumes to this group. That speaks volumes to the staff. And it tells me we're headed down the right direction to improve the lives of 20,000 people. Well done.
Thank you. All right, well, the next issue then is the bond issue project.
Thank you, sir. Come to you tonight to seek consensus from the council to bring forward a budget amendment relative to one of the council projects that was proposed using general fund balance for 2017, and that was the encumbering of $300,000 in order to purchase a rail car. Staff is disappointed, to say the least, in the fact that we're asking for the budget amendment on a two-prong basis. First prong is we simply can't get the price down low enough. The council had budgeted $300,000 at best, and with a significantly lowered project scope on the rail car, we are still north of $500,000. And we don't have that money. The second prong of the request from staff is the fact that you'll remember when we came to you with the proposed budget and the recommendation on Centerview, we let you know that construction prices had skyrocketed. They haven't gone down as at all. And we have struggled on the rack. I have authorized the contingency amount on the rack to be lowered to 2.5%. From a transparency standpoint, I fully believe that we will blow through the 2.5%, and I will be coming to the council with a recommended budget amendment for that. That is a very low amount, and this city has a lot of rock in the dirt. And in that case, we're going to be digging. Over here, we got lucky. We were on slab. I would be seeking a consensus from the council to, this is really hard to say, to kill the project for the rail car. And we would be bringing you a budget amendment asking that the project be removed from the capital improvement sales tax fund, but that the funds be retained that were transferred out of the general fund into the capital improvement sales tax fund as contingency monies, because not only do we have to get through the rack, we have to get through TV Hannah Station, and we have to get through a fabulous park down here that Parks and Rec has done blood, sweat, and tears to get the prices down through grant applications, and they continue to do so. But I worry a lot, and maybe I over-worry sometimes, but I'd rather over-worry this one than be coming to you all saying that we don't have any money to do the fabulous things that you're wanting to do with this bond money.
Mr. Holman?
Thank you, sir. I was the sponsor of this project during budget negotiations last year, $300,000 out of unreserved fund balance, and I will apologize. I sold this hard. I still think it's a viable project, and you start there, and I think that there's a possibility we could do this in the future, just certainly not within the current budget year, and then that's exacerbated by the fact that I think the funds are needed for the projects, the bond projects that we need. I really made a special plea with Sonia. I think I tied in her husband's homecoming party from the FBI Academy, and there was a lot of support for that project, and I do greatly appreciate that. We worked, myself and staff worked very hard on this since the time of the budget. Trips, multiple meetings with who we thought was going to be the sole source provider for the rehabilitation. They were astronomical. After giving us a initial soft quote on the phone of somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 to $250, they went 5 times that amount. We thought the project was dead at that point. We found another vendor that we think can do the work for, like Jim said, in the neighborhood of $500,000. But it's just like this, as passionate as I am about this project, and I still want to force to consider it in the future. And I think that it's viable. I think it's a future viable project and will provide if we can do it a very nice amenity for our citizens and a very unique amenity for our citizens. If I've got my eye on a car and I've saved up for it, and I want to go buy that Mustang, but the foundation cracks and I got to have my house mud jacked, I got to take care of business first. We made promises to our citizens. They overwhelmingly voted for those bond projects. If our banker says he needs the money, then he needs the money. So I would implore all of you to support this, that we do just what Mr. Fearborn says and put that money aside so that he can have it for the remaining projects to support cost overruns in that bond issue. I will be looking to pursue this project again, whether it's in the upcoming budget session or the one after. And again, as I promised you before, I will try and supplement those funds with private funds from a fundraising standpoint, especially after we get the endowment in place for the city. So thank you very much for your support on that. I would hope that you would support me in supporting Mr. Fearborn and releasing those funds so that he can put a roof on these buildings. Thank you.
So I'm getting some nodding going on, so is it consensus?
So does that mean we can have parties at your house?
I owe you at least that. We can have a party at my house. Jim might have to be there to take notes, so we don't break any sunshine laws.
We'll post that.
All right,
Thank you all very much.
and anything else on that particular topic? If there isn't, the next item is the board and commission appointments. That's my issue that I asked to bring forward. Initially, there'd been some confusion on an appointment that I had provided to the, one of our last actual work session, or council meetings, and I had it withdrawn, so I had an opportunity to get input from members of the council as it relates to appointments. I have with me tonight, and I'll pass these around, a list of, there's 2 or 3 there. List of terms being expired and openings that are there now for vacant seats. As you see, the board, park board has 3 that are coming expired. Those 3 individuals have asked that they be reappointed to the park board. And our policy has been in the past that if there's not been any significant problems or issues relating to those individuals, and they've been good contributing members to those boards, that they remain in place, and I see no reason to replace them at this time. I just provided the other names down there before you to show that there are other applications for those particular positions that are standing there, and as far as we know are still interested in those. But absent any problems with those 3 individuals, I do intend to place those before you for reappointment. And then under the vacant seats, we have a board of adjustment. There are 3 seats actually open there. One's formerly held by individuals who have vacated due to resignations, and then 1 has been vacant for some time. There are 2 that I have been discussing with Mr. Kellogg because they've continued to express interest through him about participating on the Board of Adjustment. You see those names also, and then 1 has also expressed to me about potentially being an alternate. I have also highlighted that one, and those are the 3 that I will bring forward to you again at the next council meeting. And then under the Arts Commission, the one that I had previously provided to you was a Ward 2 seat. That seat is highlighted there to you, and then the vacated at-large position is also highlighted for your consideration, and those will be the names that I'll present and bring forward to you. And if in the meantime there's any consternation or concerns about those, I'd please like to hear from you with regard to that. And if there isn't any, then we'll just move forward with those, okay? And that's really all I have, unless you have questions about it. I just wanted to kind of let you know for purposes of transparency and letting you know what my thought processes were on that, so I move forward with those appointments. If nothing, thank you. The next item is other. Does anybody have any other item they wish to bring before us? Do you have something?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Fearmore, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple of scheduling items. The July 3rd is a Monday night, would normally be obviously the first work session night. It is obviously a Monday before a national holiday on a Tuesday. We just wanted to make sure that the council wants to meet that night.
Anybody going out of town? Okay, that's 1 out of 8. Anybody else okay? Okay, we'll move forward with the meeting then.
Rugged.
Rugged.
Will that be a work session, you say?
It's a work session.
Okay.
Sir. And then just wanted to remind the council that the Secretary of State will be here to talk about bringing on the new voter ID law. He's scheduled for 11 o'clock tomorrow. He actually has 4 such appointments tomorrow. He is in Blue Springs at 9:30. He is here at 11. He is in Nevada an hour and a half after that, and I believe Joplin an hour and a half after that. So this is going to be, this is just going to be a,
Pretty much.
hey, hope you all know there's a voter ID law out there.
Here's the brochure, how it's going to work. Pretty much.
So we just thought we'd remind you all about that, that the item that came from the county was that there will be, he'll be making the presentation with other elected officials. I know the mayor has graciously agreed to be here on our behalf. Would any of the rest of you anticipate being here, Councilman? So we're well represented at the city level. And then I know that Mr. Bonden plans on being here. Mr. Vink has canceled the conference that he was going to. He plans on being here. And I believe that'll be it, so. Thank you.
Sandra, do you have some?
I did. I had a quick question. Mr. Fairborn, you mentioned earlier, you kind of implied we would be meeting on the 5th Monday in July. Was that in anticipation of not meeting on the 3rd, or
No.
should we also plan to
No.
meet on the 5th Monday?
I had actually, as I usually do, anticipated that everyone would be nodding yes about the 3rd.
Okay.
And we're still meeting the 5th.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure, so I could be
Yeah.
sure it's on my calendar. Thank you.
Lots of things for us to do. All right. And I didn't see our attorney, so apparently we don't have a closed session.
There is no closed session tonight, sir. I would say our attorney is in Mexico for a much-needed vacation, according to our last couple of conversations. Yeah, he may not be coming back. And he had originally offered to have Mr. Willerth here, but Mr. Willerth is on about a 2-month to 2.5-month, he's forced to stay at home, severely injured his hip, and as you know, he's been through a ton of hips, but he had injured it, and it was bothering him, and then he had what Jonathan is describing as a terrible fall. So keep him in your thoughts.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. Mr. Holman?
I did have 2 more things, sir. First is informational. I will, it looks like, again, be performing the security detail at the College World Series.
Okay.
Unfortunately, as opposed to a 4-day shift, they're talking about a 7 to 8-day shift. Departure on the 15th, returning on the 21st, which would mean 2 things. One, I will not be here for the work session on the 19th. And most unfortunately, I will not be here for the grand opening for Centerview, which I regret even more. I apologize. And the second thing is I would like to ask your leave and the council's leave. Many of you know that I coach soccer, and I've coached a team for the past 2 years here in the spring. It's a boys' high school team. Most of them play high school in the fall, so we don't play club soccer then. The boys had to play Europe this year, had a little bit of a rough season. They played in the Patriot Cup tournament over Memorial Day weekend at Lee Summit, and played some of the hardest and best soccer I've ever seen in my life. In the championship game, they went 80 minutes with no score, 0-0. They went into golden goal, 10 minutes, no score, 0-0. and they won in penalty kicks when my keeper blocked 3 of 4 penalty kicks. That's almost unheard of, as Joe will tell you. I would like most of these boys, it'll surprise you, most of these boys are from Belton. I'm not ashamed to say that's because sometimes their city programs don't take care of them very well, and we're able to do that here. I would like to bring them in front of the council meeting just as a recognition. Perhaps the mayor could say a few words. I think it would mean a lot to these young men if you guys would be so inclined.
Sure. Be happy to. Yeah, we can put them on the agenda. Yeah, absolutely.
Put them on.
Yeah.
Very good,
Oh, and, yeah, Mr. Townsend.
Thanks, Mr. Holman, for reminding me. I'm also will be out on Monday. I'll be in North Carolina for my nephew's graduation from high school, so I will not be here. But I will be here for the grand opening. I'll make sure your name's spelled right on the plaque.
Nobody asked, don't ask.
And I, I know tonight we were passing cards out, get well cards to our 2 police officers in another event that occurred in London. I don't know if you heard, there were some officers that were unarmed. One was off duty that threw themselves into the fracas of that as heroes, true heroes and public servants to the community, and keep them in their thoughts and prayers as they're convalescing from those wounds that they sustained during that knife attack. And it shows you what our officers deal with every day. Certainly people can be armed with any type of weapon, and knives and sharp instruments are never fun to come up against. And those guys who were unarmed went up against them, and it was pretty heroic on their part. So hopefully they'll convalesce, get back to duty, and gosh, I hope we can get a handle on that. I'm just not real confident in where we're going these days, but especially in Europe. Hopefully we got a handle on things here, though, or as good as we can get. 100%. But thank you, everybody. 100% here. That's right, baby. 100% here. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.